el mundo, puente natural entre los dos mares y el continente americano, y el calor y fuerza de nuestra diversa y laboriosa población de casi 60 millones de habitantes, nos hacen una región estratégica en el mundo, con la generación de energías limpias, de mejores condiciones para el comercio intrarregional y de una mejor conectividad y logística. Construimos una región de desarrollo y progreso para nuestras poblaciones y para estar preparados ante nuevos desafíos. La región que hoy tenemos es gracias a los diferentes momentos de nuestra historia, en los que hemos buscado un acercamiento más estrecho como región, dándonos cuenta de la necesidad de continuar fortaleciendo la integración como instrumento para el desarrollo de nuestras naciones. ¿Qué te parece si marcamos juntos un nuevo punto en la historia de nuestra región? SICA, 8 países construyendo una región de oportunidades.
Hola, hola, saludos. Saludos a todas y todos. Esperando se encuentren bien. Les damos la más cordial de la bienvenida en nombre del grupo ad hoc que lidera la Estrategia Regional Digital del SICA, denominada también Estrategia Regional Digital o ERDI. Mi nombre es Ricardo Cáceres. Estaré a cargo de moderar en los próximos 60 minutos. Tendré el agrado de moderar este importante webinario con el cual se está haciendo el cierre de los webinarios en este año, los que se planificaron desarrollar en este año, y hoy tendremos la importante participación de Belize. Este webinario está enmarcado dentro de la serie de webinarios denominados Hacia la transformación digital de Centroamérica y República Dominicana. Hoy tendremos la valiosa participación de Belize y conoceremos de primera mano su reciente lanzamiento de la Agenda Regional Digital de Belice, un evento que se le dio bastante cobertura y que marca un antes y un después en el abordaje que está haciendo Belice de cómo transformar digitalmente a Belice. También conoceremos y seremos parte de la información que nos trasladarán de cómo Belize está desarrollando el entorno legal necesario para que se pueda impulsar una economía digital. Dos temas que consideramos de valiosa importancia, interés, y que también la región está bastante expectante de cómo se están planteando, de tal manera que pueda esta experiencia de Belice servir también a otros países de la región que estén impulsando estrategias similares y entornos legales para impulsar las economías digitales de nuestros países. Como ustedes saben, si antes de la pandemia la transformación digital, los procesos de digitalización, las tecnologías disruptivas ya eran importantes, hoy precisamente en el marco de la pandemia se han convertido realmente fundamentales y vitales para que los países, las instituciones, las organizaciones y las regiones en general puedan plantear seriamente este tema, cómo abordarlo de manera integral, que nos permita no solo sobrevivir, sino que posicionarnos y que sea una herramienta efectiva para el desarrollo de la región, en este caso del sitio. Conscientes de la importancia de lo que son los procesos de transformación digital, tenemos ahora y contamos hoy en día con un valiosísimo instrumento como es la Estrategia Regional Digital, que consiste en un entorno facilitador para que los países puedan abordar y plantear cuál es el rumbo de la región, cómo queremos ver la región en los próximos años en materia de transformación digital y en sus procesos de digitalización, de tal manera que pueda convertirse realmente en un instrumento poderoso de desarrollo de la región por su carácter transversal. Pensamos en una transformación digital inclusiva y que por su carácter transversal, precisamente sabemos que tiene impacto en todas las áreas que se están desarrollando dentro del sistema de integración centroamericana. Como les comenté, el presente webinario se enmarca dentro de los webinarios que están prácticamente dentro del plan de divulgación que fue aprobado por el grupo ad hoc que lidera la estrategia regional digital y que está siendo conformado por los líderes de las agendas regionales digitales de cada uno de los países miembros del sitio. Sin más, permítanme presentarles, por favor, a nuestros ponentes. Quizás antes de presentarles a nuestros ponentes, algunas indicaciones muy rápidas. En la parte inferior encontrarán un botón de idioma. Este webinario tiene el servicio de traducción simultánea de inglés, español, español-inglés. Para el que lo desee, solamente tiene que seleccionar el botón que dice idioma y seleccionar el idioma correspondiente, donde ustedes pueden ver un mundito, y ahí seleccionar el botón del idioma deseado, inglés o español, y también sugerimos en la parte inferior de esta opción aparece cancelar o silenciar el sonido original para que puedan escuchar exactamente el audio que está en curso con el idioma deseado. Entonces, sin más, tendremos la participación en este webinario del señor Carmelo Durán, quien ha estado ejerciendo de manera exitosa la presidencia pro tempore del grupo ad hoc de la RD durante el presente semestre, que está siendo ejercida, como ustedes saben, por la República de Guatemala. El señor Carmelo Durán es el subdirector ejecutivo de la Comisión Presidencial de Gobierno Abierto y Electrónico de Guatemala. Adicionalmente, tenemos la presentación y el tema central de este webinario a cargo de Hacia Peralta. Hacia Peralta es la representante de Belice ante el grupo ad hoc, quien está teniendo también una participación muy activa en el desarrollo de las actividades que está impulsando el grupo ad hoc. Ella es la directora de E-Governance and Digitalization Unit del Ministry of Youth, Sport and E-Governance de Belize. Así que les damos la más cordial bienvenida a ambos. Gracias por su presencia en este importante webinario. Otra indicación muy rápida es que también en la parte inferior de su ventana encontrarán la sección de preguntas y respuestas para que en el transcurso del webinario ustedes puedan irnos formulando sus preguntas y al finalizar la presentación de Hacia tendremos una sección de preguntas y respuestas para ir respondiendo las preguntas que ustedes vayan a bien formular. Así que sin más, pasaríamos al siguiente punto de la agenda, que es la presentación, las palabras de la presidencia pro tempore del SICA, ejercida en este caso por la República de Guatemala, a cargo del señor Carmelo Durán. Adelante, por favor, Carmelo. La palabra es tuya.
Muchas gracias, Ricardo, y buenos días a todos los asistentes. Alexia, muchos éxitos en la presentación de hoy. Personalmente me siento muy satisfecho de llegar en este momento al cierre del ciclo de los webinars, en los cuales los líderes de cada uno de los países de la región han presentado los logros y avances que han tenido y los que van a obtener en un futuro cercano, de tal manera de que podamos poner a Centroamérica como una región competitiva a nivel mundial. No me queda más que desearles mucho éxito ahorita, Alexia. Estamos muy atentos a tu exposición y las palabras son tuyas. Muy buenos días a todos.
Muchas gracias, Carmelo. Gracias por tus palabras. Como bien dijo Carmelo, Carmelo ha estado desde julio prácticamente de este año hasta diciembre a cargo de la presidencia pro tempore, y en el evento último que tuvo del grupo ad hoc, pues prácticamente se ha hecho ya un traspaso simbólico hacia Panamá, que estaría desarrollando la presidencia pro tempore del próximo semestre. Pasaríamos entonces al tema central del webinario, que serían las palabras de Alexia Peralta, quien estará pues desarrollando la presentación que se denomina habilitación del entorno legal para una economía digital. Así que adelante, por favor, la palabra es tuya, Alexia.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ricardo, Carmelo, my colleagues from SICA, and even the viewers at home. You know, it's really a pleasure for me to be here to represent and speak about Belize's transformation. It's very important for us to be part of the regional conversation when we're talking about digital transformation and what it means for Belize and how can we move forward. So I want to start off by saying that the same way, in the same manner, like my colleague from Dominican Republic said, some previous webinars, stands the same with Belize, which is that digital transformation is not about the adoption of technology only. It is really about seeking and how do we address challenges and problems with technology as a tool to be able to achieve those goals. So let me share with you my presentation for today. One second. Great, so let's talk about Belize's transformation towards a digital Belize. Well, first of all, the key thing for us was how can we take this international recipe about e-governance and how can we adopt it to Belize? How can we put that Belizean flavor that allows us to meet our context and our citizens' needs? So before thinking of this is how we want to move forward in transforming our country, we first needed to think about how do we design e-governance in Belize by starting and asking two main questions. The first question is why, and of course, how. Why? Why e-governance? Why this transformation for our country? Well, while it's the best practice around the world to digitalize your country, it has actually become more important now, as Ricardo said, because of the COVID-19, there's a need for our government to be digital. But it was beyond that for us. It was first and foremost about trying to improve our citizens' needs. How do we provide for social protection? How do we provide for opportunities? How do we provide for access to services in education and health? How do we now help our citizens to be part of that digital realm? And in order to do so, we needed to understand that government itself needed to change. So we needed to have a government that's more effective and more efficient. And then, of course, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but beyond that, we also had to acknowledge that we needed a new set of tools that would allow us to recover our economy faster, but to also be more productive and more competitive. And this is where the acknowledgement of how important private sector plays in our entire transformation. But besides achieving those goals from a government's vision, we also needed to understand what it really meant, what it meant to us to be a digital government, and to us looking at the best practices, looking at the recipes in other countries. What it translated to was that we had to become a government that's more data-driven, one that seeks to make the best decisions for its citizens by using data. Now, we needed to become a government, or we need to become a government that's open, a government that's open to dialogue and discussion with our citizens so that our decisions are informed by their needs. We needed to become one that was digital by design. And what do I mean by that is that we didn't see technology as just an adoption, but that it became part of every single discussion that we do when we're talking about how do we provide services to citizens and how do we ensure that we're doing so in the best and efficient manner. And of course, fundamental to everything is for us to be user-driven. It's about the citizens. You know, it's not about the government, it's about the citizen and the needs of our citizen, and us being able to become that platform where our citizens and the business sector, everybody that operates in Belize, that lives in Belize, that's a Belizean, even if you're abroad, you can now take these opportunities for your own personal and professional growth and for your own opportunities. And of course, in all being able to do all of that, we're one that's very proactive. So this is what we say when Belize is going through this transformation journey. That is our vision. We want to become that government that provides the opportunities for our citizens, and that we're here to support that entire process. Now, that's a lot when you think about it, the entire transformation and as a government we want to do. So the next question becomes, how do we do that? And how do we do that very effectively and efficiently within the timeframes that we have, but at the same time within the resources? Because as we all know, we're a small country, but certainly with the proper utilization of our resources, we could accomplish this. So how do we go about doing that? We focused on three main areas. One of the areas is governance and institution. The second is policy framework, and the third is legal environment. To us, this is the bedrock. It is the foundation on how we want to transform ourselves, how we see ourselves being able to do that transformation. So let's talk about governance and institution a little bit. E-governance, I would say the foundation of it is really being able to coordinate so much different entities, so much government visions into one national vision, into one pathway. And that requires extremely strong coordination, a lot of dialogue, a lot of communication between ministries. So we needed to establish a Ministry of Youth, Sports, and E-Governance. And under this current administration, which is now one year, we have now had Belize first has its first e-governance ministry. And with that ministry, we now have an e-governance and digitalization unit, which I represent today. And our unit now has the mandate to make sure that we coordinate, we support, and we implement all e-governance related matters, whether it be from infrastructure and connectivity to inclusion to cybersecurity, data protection. There are so many realms that needed to be considered, and that's why it is important when any country is starting this transformation journey. And even at the private sector level, if you think about it, it really requires a strong governance and institution that will help us towards that transition. With that, of course, comes having a very strong policy framework. So apart from setting the first Ministry of E-Governance and setting up a first unit, we now needed to begin to support that unit and that ministry with the building blocks. Because what we're doing with e-governance is much in the same when we're building a house. You need to build a foundation, you need to build the walls. It's the same thing we're trying to do here. We need to build those walls that will ultimately hold that roof on top of us. And one of those is having that policy framework. What is going to be our objectives? What's going to be our activities? over this period in the different areas. So now I will venture in to tell you about the key policies. Some of the key policies that Belize now has is a national cybersecurity strategy. It was a strategy that was developed by the Ministry of Home Affairs and New Growth Industries in partnership with the Councils of Europe. And of course, we all know that while we're going digital, being able to be safe on the cyberspace is critically important. We need to be able to protect our citizens. And that's why a cybersecurity strategy was very important for us to have. We also talk about digital government being about an open government and about a government that's more transparent, more accountable. But again, how do we do that? And that's what the Open Government Action Plan speaks about. And this particular action plan was in collaboration with the OAS, Trust for Americas. It was extensive dialogue that was done, and many of the actions in that action plan are actually submitted by the civil society. So we now see the integration of the civil society in our transformation process to ensure that we are achieving our different mandates as a government when we talk about being one that's more open. And of course, as Ricardo said earlier, we just launched Belize's first national digital agenda a week ago from today. It is very exciting for us to now have this very actionable plan that will tell us over the next 4 years how we're going to take that transition. So how do we continue to build on what we have done in the past? Because it's not to say that Belize hasn't done anything in the past. We have done a lot, but how do we coordinate everything effectively and strategically? And how do we do so to ensure that in the next 4 years, we're meeting specific targets and that the citizens begin to realize and really be able to benefit from these investments, because it's a capital investment for our citizens, and they're the ones who need to realize the benefits and the opportunities from it. So we now have our national digital agenda towards a digital Belize, and I will ask now support from my colleagues to display the video for you so that you get a summary of our national digital agenda and our vision for the next 4 years.
Hi everyone, I'm Alexa Peralta, the Director of the E-Governance and Digitalization Unit, and I'm here to tell you about Belize's first National Digital Agenda 2022-2025 towards a digital Belize. The National Digital Agenda represents our collective vision to transform our country into a digital nation. It is an integrated transformation and modernization plan for the next 4 years to address key areas from digital infrastructure and connectivity to inclusion, open government, innovation, and cybersecurity. It is our unified vision to build trust in government services by providing reliable, inclusive, safe, and efficient digital solutions for citizens, businesses, and employees. This plan of action will enable the government to enter a period of rapid and disruptive transformation to improve service delivery, strengthen governance, and create public value. The digital agenda aims to achieve 3 high-level strategic goals. 1. Transforming the way government operates. 2. Developing a digital culture and society. And 3. Building the foundation for future digital transformation. How will we achieve this? The digital agenda is built on 3 main pillars. 1. ICT and technology enablers. 2. Digital government. And 3. Digitalization for recovery. These pillars have a set of programs for the next 4 years, which will contribute to achieve the 3 high-level strategic goals. Under the ICT and technology enablers pillar, we will focus on expanding connectivity in Belize, improving digital infrastructure, implementing an e-services portal, strengthening national data centers, and driving digital inclusion. Under the digital government pillar, we will focus on improving the regulatory environment, simplifying services, implementing a national identity, digitalizing the civil registry, developing open government platforms, implementing the cybersecurity strategy, and building capacity. Under the digitalization for recovery pillar, we will focus on improving digital literacy for all, implementing the national innovation strategy, supporting business innovation, achieving teleeducation and digital health, and supporting the transformation of the tourism and agriculture sector. The National Digital Agenda is an actionable plan to bring forth a more citizen-centric government and create public value. It is dependent on a strong partnership and collaboration amongst government, citizens, development partners, and industry, all working together to deliver the plan's vision. Together, we will achieve the country's transformation.
This message is brought to you by the E-Governance and Digitalization Unit under the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and E-Governance.
Right, thank you so much. So as you may see, our digital agenda is very comprehensive in trying to ensure that we're considering all areas that are necessary for our transformation, not just technology, but even about being able to meet and address the digital divide, supporting our private sector, supporting innovation. There is so much that is involved when we're talking about a country's transformation. And that's why it was critical for us to ensure that our agenda was as comprehensive as it could possibly be. And that's why our methodology, and this was done in partnership with the IDB, was to have a phase where all we studied was the demand. What was the demand of our citizens? What was the demand of the sectors? What were the challenges that we were having in these different areas? And how could we address that? So it took a lot in regards to trying to understand what are some of the issues, some of the challenges. Apart from reviewing policies, we did 2 major surveys with our Statistical Institute of Belize. One, to simply capture the demand for services, but 2, to also be able to address and to understand the connectivity level within our country, access the devices, perception of citizens in regards to e-governance. What are areas that they felt was critically important for them to be part of the process, to want to join government in this transformation? All of that was done through comprehensive surveys with our citizens to try to capture it and to inform our digital agenda, because our digital agenda is for the entire country and to meet, as I have always said, the citizens' demands. Apart from that, we also needed to understand what currently exists. We weren't starting from a place where there was nothing. I mean, today, this webinar is proof that we are using technology already. We're using it to do things differently. So we needed to understand how each ministry, their maturity level was in regards to using technology, the level of skills that they had available, what was their vision and strategy to transform. All of those things were important to begin to map as a government. Where are we when we are talking about transformation? Where are the gaps that we also have to address internally to become that platform? And that led us to develop a project bank where we identified all projects that have been done, all projects that want to be done, and we began to prioritize, now including the citizens' responses. We use that process to prioritize these projects and to select that vision, to select those pillars, those strategies, those focus areas. And we looked as well, as I said way in the beginning, what was our vision? What was our overall objective? And how do we make sure that we're achieving those with what we're trying to do? And that is what has led to our national digital agenda. The digital agenda represents both the citizens' demands, as well as acknowledging that there are various challenges that we need to accomplish and we need to overcome. And we need to do so by having targeted projects and targeted initiatives to ensure that we can resolve them within the next 4 years. And like the plan said, it's about building that foundation for future transformation. So the transformation journey doesn't end with that national digital agenda. Transformation journeys are very consistent. It's always evolving because our needs evolve, and that's what digital transformations are about. So I'm glad and really excited on behalf of my team to be able to do this webinar to tell you, what has been our transformation journey in achieving this very monumental step as a government, as a country, in having this comprehensive national digital agenda. But that's only, what can I say, one piece of the pie with having the policy frameworks. What also need to be complementary to these policy frameworks is the legal environment. And that's the next step for us. But before I go into that, I wanted to highlight that some key factors that we consider when we're talking about our digital agenda. As I've said, having a national vision, having collaboration, having that strong governance, but also being willing to do things very differently in a very agile manner, in an agile culture, not just government, but even overall, all our citizens. And then, of course, being part of the regional dialogue, being part of the international dialogue, and seeking this support. So for us, this webinar is vitally important to also support us in achieving that digital agenda. So let's venture in a bit on the legal environment and what Belize has done in regards to our legislations, what has been our process, and what are the key features. So how have we now complemented our policy environment? Belize today has 5 key legislations that govern fully and support our citizens' government in becoming a more digital culture and society. We also have a data protection bill that will soon enough become an act and go to Parliament fully for approval and ascension. So let's talk first about the Cybercrime Act 2020. This is a bill that was done by the Ministry of Home Affairs and New Growth Industries. And the objective of it was really to provide the framework that will allow and protect for citizens as we now join this cyberspace. We needed to look at what were offenses that would be necessary in the event of a crime, but as well as what would be the protection measures that could be afforded to our citizens in the event that they become now victims of these crimes on cyberspace. So the Cybercrime Act was an important step forward in acknowledging that part of a digital economy is being safe, and we need as a government to provide that. We also now have the data protection bill. It's not an act as yet, but it is a bill. It has been approved. It's simply just being finalized. And the point of that data protection bill is similarly to the objectives of the Cybercrime Act, in that we acknowledge that today, being online, being digital means that your data as a citizen is also online, and that you are also now vulnerable to cyber crimes, and that we need to ensure that you have the protection measures to protect yourself. How do you protect your data, your privacy? How do we do so not just for adults, but how do we do so for children? How do children now have protections for them when they are online? I read a study that said that children spend about 8 hours a day on their tablets and computers and digital devices. So we also need to start thinking about how are our laws comprehensive enough to ensure that everyone in our country is protected. The Electronic Transactions Act of 2021, this specific objective was for us to enable electronic commerce, to further support it, and in so doing to also support the use of digital signatures, electronic signatures, be able to do electronic contracts, and helping us to move forward in cross-border trade. It also speaks to the electronic transferable records, and now electronic records now being as valid as a paper document. As we all know, government, as being one of the largest service providers, has traditionally used a lot of paper and done a lot of its services on paper. So how do we transition ourselves from being mostly paper to now paperless? And that law needed to be enforced so that it allows every single one in Belize to be able to do that. Electronic evidence. This also is a complementary act to the cybercrime and the data protection, because while we're providing you with measures to protect yourself online, we also needed to provide measures to our judiciary system to be able to utilize now these electronic evidence, whether it be evidence that's gotten from a phone, it's gotten from a computer, evidence that's on an email, on a voice note. All of these now become forms of evidence that are now valid to be used in court whenever we are dealing with these types of criminal offenses. So we also needed to support that judiciary system to also be able to enact and to implement the provisions of those acts. Public sector data sharing, a key component to becoming a digital government is being able to share data. As I said, way in the beginning, it's about a government that's data driven. And the first step to that is having access to data, having access to quality data, but doing so in protection measures, in ensuring that we're not violating anybody's rights to privacy, we're not violating their freedom, and that we're doing all of these sharing only in the interest of the citizens, that information is shared for specific purposes. And that's what the Public Sector Data Sharing Act is all about. It allows us to be more interoperable, to be able to connect with each other better, to be able to dialogue better, and to make better decisions. Because now if I can access information as a government, of course, specific information and protected within those measures, access information, for example, from agriculture. I'm at the tourism industry and I would like to know how many products are produced in a given area in Belize, or what's the consumption of a specific commodity. Those data then help us to make better informed decisions, and that's what the Public Sector Data Sharing Act tries to achieve. And then lastly, our Electronic Funds Transfer Crime Act 2021, also allows us to support the banking industry. So as we move to electronic commerce, as we move to online platforms, we also have to acknowledge that there is the vulnerabilities and the challenges of different criminalities happening on the cyberspace when it comes to banking, when it comes to paying your credit cards, your debit cards. These are things that have been happening over the years, but now with the prevalence of electronic commerce, the growth of it, then we also needed to provide those protection measures to support and to protect also the banking industry, and for there to be some level of recourse against any of those criminal activities. What was the process in all of these laws? First of all, we needed to know what was the problem. What were we trying to solve? What were the gaps in our legislation? So this was an aspect that was actually done by the Economic Development Council under the Office of the Prime Minister, and of course the Ministry of Home Affairs and New Growth Industries for the Cybercrime Act, in them seeking to look at internationally how was Belize performing in these realms, what were the different gaps and areas that needed to be addressed, and how could we address those problems? Because we always seek to try to ensure that we're not reinventing the wheel, but instead we're trying to learn from best practices. The Economic Development Council partnered with the Compete Caribbean, and then the New Growth Industries, the Ministry of Home Affairs and New Growth Industries partnered with the Council of Europe to then both execute two separate projects to begin the actual diagnostic. So once we know what the problem is, let's zoom in a little bit more. Let's try to find out what is the real problem, what's the real causes, and how do we address them. After that was done, both teams did stakeholder consultations with the private sector, the judiciary system, the banking system, the government, and even with external partners. So for example, through the EDC, the Economic Development Council, on the Electronic Transactions Act, they did collaborated with UNCITRAL to ensure that our legislations were also within those model laws, that we also were able to adopt some of the United Nations conventions in our legislations. The legal drafting, of course, this is where the lawyers really and truly lead in ensuring that we are drafting a legislation that, apart from meeting our needs, is meeting also the international standards and best practices. We had to get our cabinet approval, and then of course we are now at the stage of implementation. So a key thing for us is acknowledging that passing a legislation is only one part of the process. You also need to educate the citizens on what this legislation means. What do the provisions now provide for them? How can they now utilize this new law, not just for their benefit, but to also protect themselves? And in that implementation phase, my unit is currently designing a public awareness campaign, once more with the support of the Compete Caribbean and the UNICEF, as well as all the key partners, the Economic Development Council, the Ministry of Home Affairs and New Growth Industries, the Ministry of Education, to ensure that we are now beginning a process of awareness and education on what all these 6 bills and acts that I have stated earlier provide for, so that we can all become familiar with what our rights are in Belize and how it supports us. What are the key features of our legislations? I really wanted to highlight that our legislations, especially the Electronic Transactions Act, is built on the UNCITRAL model laws. It's built on best practices. It's built on international standards to ensure that now Belize has, if I can say, strengthened that enabling environment. We are actually one of the first Caribbean countries to implement the UNCITRAL law of electronic transferable records. So that's a huge success for us to now be a leading country in the Caribbean when it comes to having modern laws that really cater to our citizens. Our data protection, of course, is based off of the GDPR framework, which is the European standard, as we all know, for the data protection of citizens and to ensuring that they have their data privacy. And then lastly, we have based many of our legislations, the Electronic Transactions Act, the Electronic Evidence, the Electronic Funds Transfer Crime Bill, have all been based on different United Nations convention, as well as the Cybercrime Act was designed to ensure that it's also part of Belize adoption to the Budapest Convention. So we try to ensure that at all times, our legislation didn't just enable our economy, but it also allowed us as a country to move forward in starting to adopt best practices from international and standards, so that we can ensure that we're definitely ensuring that even our citizens being able to interact outside of our borders is supported in the entire process. So I just want to highlight as I close our partners. Of course, as you have heard through my presentation, one of our key partners has been Compete Caribbean in the entire process of the development of 5 of our major legislations, the Economic Development Council, who led that specific project on behalf of the country, and the IDB, who has helped us tremendously in both developing our national digital agenda, but also supporting us in all the legal frameworks that has been done. And they continue to support us as we continue our transformation journey. It's my pleasure to have been able to do this webinar and highlight to you some of the key successes that we have had, and to highlight that these are some of the foundational pillars that as a country we need to take to ensure that we can move forward with having that digital economy and that digital nation and supporting our citizens. So thank you so much. If you ever want to know more about us, please contact us. We're here to have conversation and to share and to also learn from all our regional and international partners. Thank you so much, Ricardo.
Muchas gracias, Alexia, por tu brillante presentación. Definitivamente vemos este salto cualitativo que representa la nueva agenda digital de Belice. De hecho, vimos en el evento del pasado 6 de diciembre, reciente, estamos en un evento reciente, lanzamiento precisamente de esta agenda, y nos dio muchísimo agrado también ver cómo estaba el primer ministro Johnny Briceño al frente precisamente de la presentación de esta agenda. Esto nos está demostrando a nosotros que estas iniciativas dejaron de ser unas iniciativas prácticamente secundarias y se están volviendo parte importante del desarrollo de nuestros países y de la región. Así que muchas felicidades por esta iniciativa que han presentado y deseamos el mejor de los éxitos. Tenemos tu presentación ha despertado un enorme interés. Tenemos una cantidad importante de preguntas que por cuestión de tiempo vamos a tratar de consolidar algunas y trasladártelas para tu consideración. Tenemos aquí una que menciona cuáles han sido los principales desafíos que ha enfrentado Belice en la construcción de su agenda digital nacional. Si nos puedes comentar esos principales desafíos que todo proyecto o propuesta de esta naturaleza conlleva. Adelante.
Sorry, Ricardo, can you just repeat for me one more time?
Okay. La consulta es cuáles han sido los principales desafíos que ha enfrentado Belice en la construcción de su agenda digital nacional.
Actually, that's a very good question, and I can say it's been change in people wanting to accept the change and the transformation that we're trying to undergo. It is something very new to not just the government, but even outside of the government, and looking in how do we develop an agenda that's comprehensive. I can safely say that, and I think this is all around with all governments, we tend to think that transformation is sectorial. It's only a sector. And I need to transform it in this specific way and in this manner. So that has been one of the biggest challenges, I'll say, in developing that digital agenda, but throughout our entire transformation. But I think that's where strong communication and dialogue is necessary, because it's only true that we can realize that we all have the same vision. We all have the same objective. It's just that we have different manners to get there. So how do we come together to find that one pathway, that one highway we all want to travel? So I would say it's, I won't say resistance fully, but just the understanding of the transformation process.
Muchas gracias, Alexia. Definitivamente estamos ante un cambio cultural de cómo plantear y repensar las formas tradicionales de trabajo que habíamos venido desarrollando como gobierno, como país, como sociedad. Esto me lleva a la siguiente pregunta en el tema de la conectividad, que es un tema fundamental, digamos, para poder tener éxito, digamos, en el desarrollo de este tipo de agendas nacionales digitales. El acceso a la banda ancha, el acceso a los servicios digitales que el gobierno pueda estar pensando en impulsar. ¿Cómo está pensando Belice? ¿Cuál es la estrategia que tiene pensado implementar para ampliar, digamos, esta cobertura y asegurar la conectividad de sus ciudadanos?
Yeah, that's a great question, and indeed fundamental. In the case of Belize, a lot of our area it's primarily rural areas, so it's been a difficult task to ensure that we're also not creating a further digital divide. And there are actually 3 different ways that we're trying to tackle digital inclusion in Belize. One of them, of course, is expanding connectivity, so expanding our infrastructure in rural areas in partnership with the telecommunication providers. but not just in looking at traditional infrastructure, but even looking at non-traditional ones as well. But besides that, acknowledging that connectivity and inclusion is not just about access to data and access to internet, but also having the means to do so. So having the devices as well. So we're going to be piloting in 2022 digital labs in 5 rural areas, which we hope to expand in collaboration with the Department of Youth Service and with the different village councils to try to provide now access to the actual digital devices apart from the internet and the data. And what we're going to do is at these digital labs, we're going to conduct trainings, because this is the third concern in digital inclusion, is not just access to data and to devices, but also to skills. How do we prepare now the citizens to utilize these devices? And we're going to be conducting digital literacy programs that will focus on supporting the upskilling in basic digital skills, but even beyond that, because we need to start thinking about the next generation and how we prepare them to be the leaders that we'll need to continue this transformation for us. So we're also tackling by doing digital literacy programs. We will also have a digital boot camp, which is going to be an intensive professional level training to ensure that when you have completed that training, that you're now a certified expert within the area and you can now employ your services in the market and to meet our private sector's demands. So we're trying to tackle the issue of digital inclusion and digital divide in multiple ways.
Interesante, Alexa, lo que se está planteando por Belize en esta materia de conectividad. En el tema de conocer, digamos, ahora que ya Belize está formando parte de un espacio regional en el tema digital, ¿verdad? Como es el marco del SICA, la estrategia regional digital del SICA. ¿Cómo ves tú ese espacio nuevo que se ha creado? ¿Cuáles oportunidades ves como Belice y en lo que ha transcurrido en el presente año de la participación de Belice en este espacio? ¿Cómo ves el potencial que representa el SICA y en especial su estrategia regional digital en el desarrollo de la región en materia de transformación digital y la digitalización también de todos estos procesos regionales que nos pueden posicionar como bloque?
Thank you, Ricardo. As I said in my presentation, e-governance isn't new. It's not a new concept. It's something that has an international recipe that we need to adopt for Belize, but adopt it in a context that allows us to address but to capitalize on us being a Central American country as well as a Caribbean country. I think over the past year, in being very active and very involved in the SICA realm when it comes to the digital transformation of the region, it has truly showed us that there is a lot for us to learn from. My colleagues, for example, from Dominican Republic are advanced from us in cybersecurity. So we see the opportunity to build that relationship with them to be able to learn, and so that we can execute in country, in Belize, at a much faster rate now, because it's not a matter of then trying to just learn how to do something, but we now have that support. So I'm very grateful to be part of this group, because I think it has been a lot of support that my colleagues have been providing me over the last year as Belize continues in this journey in knowing really and truly how we can execute some of these things, and also how can we learn from it, because we all know that sometimes we plan how to do things sometimes, but it just doesn't go the way it should. So it has been a good learning process for us, having learned lessons from our colleagues, but also helped us to see the potential and the opportunities that exist. The more we dialogue, the more we communicate as a region, So I think that is what's going to be fundamental and helpful to us in moving forward. And as you see, it's actually highlighted for us as one of our key success factors for the digital agenda to be implemented, us building these international relationships and partnerships, because at the end of the day, as much as we can learn from them, I believe they can also learn a lot from Belize too, in our experience.
Definitivamente, creo que es un aprendizaje mutuo, es un camino compartido, ¿verdad? Donde todos nos apoyamos mutuamente y con objetivos claros y comunes que tenemos que desarrollar, porque básicamente los problemas que estamos afrontando son problemas comunes de la región. Me gustaría, antes de cerrar la parte de preguntas y respuestas, nos consultan aquí ¿cuál fue el proceso o metodología que hicieron para identificar esos proyectos nacionales digitales clave que ustedes tienen identificados en este momento y que están contenidos en el Plan de Acción de Desarrollo Abierto que se mencionó en la presentación? Si nos puedes comentar un poquito cómo es esa parte, porque cuando se implementan este tipo de agendas, pues el reto está en identificar exactamente dónde están esos temas centrales, medulares, y cómo abordarlo.
So one of the key things with listing all the projects was that we started to notice common trends, because we asked the questions, what are you trying to achieve from the project? What's your target? What are you trying to solve? And then we began to see those specific trends from the different ministries in what is it that they wanted to solve. We then looked at our standings internationally, our benchmarks. Where were we internationally in regards to open government? Where were we in regards to connectivity? Where were we in regards to e-participation? So we started to also look at, okay, we have these projects and these are their objectives, but we also from a country have these areas that we have over many years not improved. So how do we now match these areas? How do we find the best solutions that have been provided and suggested to ensure that we're matching it with the respective objectives, so that when we're implementing to achieve those specific indicators, but that those indicators are also helping us to improve our global standard. Because a major part of achieving the digital agenda is to become one that's more competitive, even at the global level. So we also needed to understand that. A key aspect of the projects, of course, was to have a deeper understanding of their status of implementation, have a deeper understanding of their resources that are available, and then the capacity of the ministries to implement those projects respectively, because that's also very important. While we might want to do certain projects, we also need to think about what's the capacity of the ministry, but also what's the capacity of the government to venture into those areas. So it required us to take a step backwards, if I can say, in just trying to analyze overall what were the areas that we are very competitive in today, but also what are areas that we do need to improve, and what are the projects that needed to be assigned to be able to improve it. The agenda has about 45 different projects for the next 4 years, but they're not stagnant. So what we're doing is that the project bank exists, and whenever a project is completed, we revisit it on a yearly basis and look at, if these projects have been completed, how do we take another one from the project bank and now begin to initiate? So the idea is to have a project bank that's evolving, and that we're always adding to it, and that we're continuously executing that project bank.
Gracias, Alexia. Excelente. Muy buena metodología, definitivamente, como para focalizar los esfuerzos. Hay una serie de preguntas. También agradecemos la participación activa que han tenido los diferentes asistentes. Agradecemos el interés en todas estas consultas. Lamentablemente, por cuestiones de tiempo, ya estamos cortos de tiempo y vamos a tratar de trasladar a Belize las preguntas que no han sido respondidas para colocarlas en nuestro canal de de YouTube o en Facebook las respuestas de las mismas. Alexia, un mensaje final, por favor, adelante.
Thank you, Ricardo. Well, I just want to say, thank you to the SICA team and to my colleagues for all the support that has been provided to us for the last year, and to include us and to invite Belize to be part of the regional process in this digital transformation, and to give us these types of platforms to be able to share our experience to the general public and all those at home. I invite you to join us in this transformation process. Follow us on our ministry, Youth, Sports, and E-Governance Facebook page. You'll see a lot in 2021. We'll be doing a lot of public awareness campaigns on our digital agenda, our legislations. So if you want to know more, please join us, follow us as we continue this transformation, but also share with us your ideas, your thoughts, because alone we can't do this. The only way we can do it is if the citizens are also part of the conversation. So please feel free to connect with us. I look forward to it, and I look forward to future webinars where we continue this dialogue and this discussion, and that we have more time, Ricardo, to do more questions and answers. I think it was great to hear some of the questions, and I look forward to having a little bit more time next time, but thank you.
No, muchas gracias a ti, Alexia, por tu brillante presentación. Seguramente, ni lo dudes por un momento, que vamos a tener muchos más webinarios de esta naturaleza, porque precisamente uno de los grandes objetivos que tiene el Grupo ADOC y la Estrategia Regional Digital es tener este espacio donde podamos compartir experiencias, conocimientos, buenas prácticas y fomentar la cooperación horizontal entre países. Así que ni lo dudes por un segundo que vamos a seguir fomentando este tipo de eventos. Muchas gracias, Alexia, por tu participación y éxitos en la implementación de la agenda digital de Belice. Continuamos entonces, vamos a hacer el cierre del evento. Tenemos la palabra de la presidencia pro tempore. Antes de darle la palabra a don Carmelo Durán, quisiera externarle el agradecimiento en nombre del Grupo ADOC y de la Secretaría Técnica Administrativa. Realmente Carmelo Durán ha estado al frente del Grupo ADOC durante este semestre y ha ejercido un rol determinante en el éxito y los logros y resultados que ha venido desarrollando el Grupo ADOC. A la fecha, para el conocimiento de ustedes, ya contamos con un plan bastante avanzado y una agenda regional digital que estará siendo presentada en los próximos días del próximo año. Así que adelante, Carmelo, gracias por tu gestión y muy agradecido por todo el liderazgo que has implementado en este grupo. Adelante.
Muchas gracias, Ricardo. Gracias por tus palabras. Alexia, felicitaciones por los logros que has alcanzado con la agenda digital y los nuevos retos que tienes en Belice. Mis más sinceras felicitaciones. Como dice Ricardo, pues está llegando a cerrarse un ciclo más. Estamos terminando un año. Estamos terminando la presidencia pro tempore asignada a Guatemala. Satisfecho con lo que se ha hecho, sabiendo que hay mucho más por hacer y contento porque el Grupo ADOC es integrado por grandes líderes regionales quienes han hecho una labor muy importante. El Grupo ADOC ha hecho cosas bien importantes a nivel de cada país y a nivel internacional, logrando muchos objetivos. Me voy también satisfecho porque sé que el Grupo ADOC va a estar liderado por Luis Oliva, que es un excelente referente regional, el Panamá, todo lo que ha hecho, que le va a dar el impulso que el SICA y que el Grupo ADOC ha tenido últimamente, dándose a notar en distintos ambientes. Así que todo tiene un final, todo tiene un inicio. Estamos cerrando un ciclo, pero vamos en una espiral ascendente. De tal manera que para mí, más que todo, fue un honor y un gusto trabajar con los líderes de la región, con el equipo que lidera Ricardo. Ellos son los que hacen realmente mucho trabajo back office. Por ellos son los que están haciendo que el SICA y el Grupo ADOC estemos haciendo los logros pequeños, pero que hemos estado alcanzando. Así que feliz año para todos y que el 2022 nos traiga a todos, a toda la región, a todos los países, muchos éxitos y que podamos realmente lograr poner a Centroamérica y a República Dominicana, a Belice, como una región de oportunidades. Y no voy manejando, me parqué para poder hablar, así que no tengan pena, no rompí ninguna regla.
La seguridad ante todo. Gracias, Carmelo. Muchas
Mucho
gracias
gusto.
por tu liderazgo durante este semestre. Agradecemos a Alexia por su participación. Gracias a todos los asistentes por su participación activa en el presente webinario. Muchas gracias a todos los que nos han seguido durante todo el año en estos webinarios denominados Hacia la transformación digital de Centroamérica y República Dominicana. Los invitamos también a que nos puedan seguir y continuar viendo los avances del SICA de materia de la estrategia regional digital. Pronto tendremos el espacio de la sección especializada de la ERD en el portal del SICA, que estaremos anunciándolo en los próximos días también. Tenemos ahí todas las redes sociales en pantalla. Les agradecemos su tiempo, su valiosa participación y por favor sigámonos cuidando. La pandemia continúa. Tenemos que mantener siempre las medidas de precaución para nosotros y nuestra familia. Felices Navidades para todos y un feliz y venturoso año nuevo. Saludos y bendiciones. Nos vemos pronto.
Somos el corazón de América, una región nacida en hermandad.
Somos una tierra llena de legado ancestral, un esplendor sin igual.
Somos un mosaico de tradiciones y cultura vibrante.
Somos un pulmón del planeta que da vida al 12% de la biodiversidad del mundo.
Somos Centroamérica.
Nuestra diversa y gran riqueza natural. Nuestros preciados patrimonios culturales e históricos. Nuestra privilegiada posición geográfica en el mundo, puente natural entre los dos mares y el continente americano, y el calor y fuerza de nuestra diversa y laboriosa población de casi 60 millones de habitantes, nos hacen una región estratégica en el mundo, con la generación de energías limpias, de mejores condiciones para el comercio intrarregional y de una mejor conectividad y logística. Construimos una región de desarrollo y progreso para nuestras poblaciones y para estar preparados ante nuevos desafíos. La región que hoy tenemos es gracias a los diferentes momentos de nuestra historia, en los que hemos buscado un acercamiento más estrecho como región, dándonos cuenta de la necesidad de continuar fortaleciendo la integración como instrumento para el desarrollo de nuestras naciones. ¿Qué te parece si marcamos juntos un nuevo punto en la historia de nuestra región? SICA, 8 países construyendo una región de oportunidades.